Hey, I'm Holland, and I'm with Memphis Public Library, and welcome to Community Art Academy, where we've partnered with the University of Memphis's Art Education Department to bring you an art lesson this week. And this week we are going to start off with a book called Maybe Something Beautiful: How Art Transformed a Neighborhood by F. Isabel Campoy and Teresa Howell, and illustrated by Rafael Lopez. In the heart of a gray city, there lived a girl who loved to doodle, draw, color, and paint. Every time she saw a blank piece of paper, Mira thought to herself, maybe. And because of this, her room was filled with color and her heart was filled with joy. On her way to school one day, Mira gave a round apple to Mr. Henry, the owner of the shop down the street. She gave a flower to Miss Lopez, the lady with sparkling eyes. She gave a songbird to Mr. Sachs, and a red heart to the policeman who walked up and down the streets. On her way home, Mira taped a glowing sun on the wall, hiding in the shadows. Her city was less gray, but not much. The next day, Mira saw a man with a pocket full of paintbrushes. He gazed at the wall. He looked at her son. He held his fingers up in a square and peered through them. He said thoughtfully. "What do you see?" Mira asked. "Maybe something beautiful," the man replied. Then just like that, he dipped a brush into the paint. Bam! Pow! The shadows scurried away. Sky blue cut through the gloom, and the man's laughter was like a rainbow spreading across the sky. "Who are you?" Mira asked. "I'm an artist," he said, "a muralist. I paint on walls." "I'm an artist too," she told him. He handed Mira a paintbrush. "Then come on." Mira dipped it in the loudest color she saw. Yow-wee! The wall lit up like sunshine. As the man drew pictures on the bricks, Mira added color, punch, and pizzazz. Soon, Mr. Sachs joined in. Then came the others. Everyone painted to the rhythm: salsa, meringue, bebop. Even Mira's mama painted and danced the cha-cha-cha. The whole neighborhood became a giant block party. Until the policeman walked up. "Excuse me," he said. The music stopped. Mira put down her paintbrush. They were surely in trouble. The officer cleared his throat, then paused. "May I paint with you?" he asked. So Mira handed him a paintbrush and the music started again. Teachers and papas jumped in, babies too. Mira and the man handed out brush after brush. Colors spread through the streets, and so did joy. Whenever Mira and the man went, art followed like a string of a kite. After they colored the walls, they painted utility boxes and benches. They decorated sidewalks with poetry and shine, and everyone danced. Together, they created something more beautiful than they had ever imagined. When their clothes were splattered with a million colors, everyone sat down to rest, except the muralist. His eyes sparkled. "You, my friends, are all artists," he told them. "The world is your canvas." He smiled wide and pulled everything together in a big sweeping motion. His paintbrush was like a magic wand. When he was finished, Mira added, "One more bird, way up in the sky. Maybe," she thought, "just maybe." The end.
Thanks, Holland.
So my name is Abby, this is Sarah. We are art education majors, and I am planning on being a elementary art teacher.
And I'm planning on being a high school art teacher.
So today we're going to introduce y'all to something really cool that you may or may not have worked with before, and that is watercolors.
So why are watercolors fun to work with? Well, they're water-based, so they're easy to clean up, and they're extremely safe for people of all ages. These paints are super fun to play around with and by themselves, but they also offer us a lot of opportunities.
So you've also probably heard of something called a technique, and a technique is it's one of our vocabulary words, and it's a way an artist, or the method an artist uses to work with a medium. And so our medium today is watercolor. When working with our medium today, we're going to combine some other materials and other mediums to practice around with 3 other techniques.
The first one will be oil pastel resist. The second we'll be trying is wet on wet technique. And the third, we're going to show you some cool things that salt will do to your watercolors.
So today, the things you will need to get started with us is your watercolor palette and paintbrush, some containers for water, some paper towels, you need some oil pastels or crayons, and a little bit of salt.
Most of those things will be in your blue bag. When talking about our book, we also have to bring up some really important vocabulary words. These are going to help us connect the book we just read with our watercolor project. The first term we're going to talk about is community. Community refers to a group of living things like us who share an environment, and usually we share the same interests, beliefs, and needs.
So when thinking of your community, there are probably some symbols and images you think could accurately represent your environment, the space around you. So I know I personally think of the Memphis Bridge or the Bass Pro Pyramid that sits right on the Mississippi River here in Memphis. So start thinking of how you could represent your community. Is there a certain statue in your neighborhood that you think represents it? Or even your school mascot? A symbol that represents your community could be anything that makes you think about it.
Also in our book, Mira, our main character, faces the dilemma of how to make her community more beautiful. She ends up putting a drawing of the sun along a dark alley in her community. I think this can apply to all of us as well. So while you're working on your watercolor, think of places in your community that you can brighten up. We're going to combine these ideas of symbols to accurately representing our community with the act of freshening it up and making it more beautiful.
So first, we're going to ask you to take your oil pastels or your crayons or whatever you are going to work with. And we're also going to ask you to take those symbols that we asked you to brainstorm and think of how you could put them together in a landscape or a regional environment. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to put the symbols of the pyramid and the Memphis Bridge alongside the Mississippi River. So I'm going to use the white color oil pastel. I'm going to draw the river. You can't really see it, but you can probably get a good idea. I'm going to go around here and carve out the river bank, and I'm going to set the pyramid over here.
It's a good idea to go over your watercolor or your oil pastel a couple of times too, so that you get a good thick line.
So now I'm going to also put over the river, I'm going to put the Memphis Bridge. Do this right here. And then you can also combine your watercolor or your oil pastel colors to make them a little more visible.
Alright, so next we're going to introduce y'all to our watercolor palette. These paints are super easy to work with as long as you know that water is your friend. You do need a good amount of water, but you don't want to use too much to make a mess. So what we're going to do is take our water, and it's good to have 2 containers, so you have one to dip in and one to clean with. add the water to the color that you want to use first. I'm going to do blue for our river. And you want to add a good amount so that it's not sticky and goopy, but it is liquidy. So add your first color to the area that you want to start with. And we're going to see how the wax on our wax resist keeps the watercolor from going on top of it. So just take your watercolor, and just like that, our watercolor stays in the lines, and we can see where our white was earlier, and now it's not sticking to our brown. That's because the wax is resisting the watercolor. And you can use that to your advantage too to help you stay in the lines while you're painting. Make sure you keep cleaning up after yourself too.
So one technique we can use to paint with watercolors is called wet on wet, and it's exactly what it sounds like, and it's a really neat way to fill in a space with color. We're going to wet the area of our paper. We're going to make it where the paper is obviously shiny, but we don't want to make it to where it's a puddle and it's a big mess. You can decide if you want it to be a smaller area or a bigger area, and you can also practice on how, once you have that right amount of water, how it'll spread out, and you can even, mix colors. So when we go back to our paper, we are going to make sure I'm going to do the sky because I think it'll have a really cool effect and actually make it like we have clouds in there, stuff like that. So I'm going to make sure the paper is shiny and wet enough, but again, not a mess. I'm going to go back to our blue, and I'm going to see when I dab it on there, if it spreads out like I want it to, and it did. So you can use that for, sky, water, anything you can think of.
And you can even dot different colors to blend together. By placing different colors next to each other, they'll kind of bleed into each other. And you can use colors like red, orange, and yellow to make a sunset sky, or you can use the blue and the white spaces to make a sky with clouds. Be careful to give a little bit of space between your colors so they don't get muddy. And be careful that you're using enough water, but not too much that it's going to make your paper soggy or that it's going to bleed out onto the table. Even if it does get a little too wet, you can always take your paper towel and dab it just a little bit to take off some of that extra water.
Okay, so do you like using watercolors so far? We have one more technique for you guys to try, and it's really fun. So, does everyone have a little bit of salt? Did you even know that you could use salt in art? Well, we can do that by sprinkling some salt on a wet area of your watercolor, and the salt will react, and when it dries, it'll have this really cool effect on your paper.
Oh, you're good. When you've got the section that you want to do, and we can probably come right into this. So when you know what section you want to do your your salt on, we're going to get it nice and wet. I'm going to do it on the pyramid. And while it's still wet, you're going to take your salt and sprinkle it on top, just like you would on top of food. And then leave it there. Be careful not to touch it while it's drying. When it does dry, you can brush all of your salt off, and it'll leave behind the speckled marks. It does that because the salt absorbs a little bit of the water, and along with it the color, when you sprinkle it on top. So what are you going to use salt on for your watercolor? Where do you think it would look good with some texture or some speckling? I did it on my my pyramid, but you could do it on grass or maybe even your sky too.
And don't worry if you want to go back and add it to a dry piece of, or a dry area of your painting. You can go back, make that dry area a little bit wet again, add another tiny layer of your color, and then you go back to your salt, and there you go. It'll work like that too.
did you guys have one technique that was your favorite? What did you like about it?
And tell us what you painted. Did you paint a pyramid and a bridge and the river like we did? Or did you use a different symbol to represent your community?
So just like Mira did in our book, we brightened our community using watercolor. Will you hang your piece in your home, or will you give it to a friend and brighten their day? How do you plan on brightening your community with your art?
And thank you so much for painting with us today. Don't forget to make sure you put your painting into a dry safe area for it to finish drying. And if you would like to see a finished example, we have one right there.
So don't forget to dump out your watercolor glasses into the sink, clean up the table behind you, and store your watercolor and your watercolor paints out of the reach of your pets or maybe your younger siblings. Cool.
Bye.
Thanks so much,
Thank you.
guys.